Hi, and welcome back to the Building Bigger Lives podcast. I'm without my co host, Michael Regan, but I'm Kathryn Peterson here, bringing you a guest today, Bobby Aldighieri. He is a little bit of a local legend here in Steamboat. He's my friend, and we've known each other for a while. And he's one of the people who I find really, really fun to talk to about coaching and excellence, lots of things that involve everything we talk about in the podcast. So he's also an Olympian. He's a coach. He loves bikes. He's lived in Steamboat for a long time. So I want to welcome Bobby Aldighieri to the podcast. Welcome in. Thanks for being
Hey,
here.
excited.
Yes, it'll be fun. Anything else I should add to your introduction?
I don't think so. No, it's good. Real estate guy, Olympian,
Yeah,
father, husband. Yeah, it's good.
all the things.
Yeah.
No, that's good. So, and we'll get into the real estate piece of it a little bit as well. But first, you have a unique perspective about really what makes people excel into that top, let's say 1% or 0.5% in their field. And you've seen the difference between people who can get there and maybe can't. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that. What do you think that those micro differences or differences are between those people that just excel that little bit more?
Yeah, well, I think it's a few things, you know. Um, I think that, and it depends on the genre, you know, on the in this situation, or if it's a sport or real estate. It's interesting, but there's certainly some overall common themes. I was discussing this with a good friend of mine who's one of the coaches on the U.S. team, who I skied with. He's sort of unarguably the most successful coach in the history of freestyle mogul skiing. um, he's a good example, actually, of real success and a lot of focus. But but you can't, I mean, you can't do it without, in sport, as a coach or as an athlete. But I'm just, as because more recently I've been a coach. From a coach's perspective, you need the talent, and it doesn't have to be A+ talent, but you need the talent. You just can't win world championships, and you can't win Super Bowls or NBA championships, or Olympic games without talent. It doesn't have, but like I said, it doesn't have to be A+ talent. It could be B+ talent, or even B talent. But so that's number one. And I think that's more in sports. Like I honestly don't feel quite that much in real estate. I don't, I mean, certainly people have a better presence and are socially maybe a little bit better, but I think that's maybe a little bit more hard work, and making sure that you're able to do what's necessary, to get the job done. But of course, hard work. There's never, Kathryn, as you know, there's never a replacement for hard work, and showing up every day, and being pretty smart about your process. I think that's huge. When I was skiing, you know, I would say I started this talk out last Christmas, or last at the last Olympics, at this wine bar, and I started out saying, you're looking at the least talented Olympian in the history of Steamboat Springs, and people thought it was kind of funny, and um, but I think, yeah, I just think certainly showing up is a huge part of that. You can overcome a lot. I don't think I'm really the least talented Olympian in the history of Steamboat Springs, but I would consider myself like a fairly low talent Olympian. I would, but I had a lot of success, I think, just from doing it, and the grind, and love of that moment to moment. And I think you would agree. I think that you can't really manufacture that love for anything, whether
Mhm.
whether it's your vocation or sport or whatever. I
Mhm.
think that, but that love drives a lot of that day to day, moment to moment type activity.
Yeah, so I'm hearing you say it's like the passion and love for the sport or the activity or the job or the career. And then also just showing up, which I think is a huge thing that people forget is if you actually go to the practices and you go to the MLS tours and you go to the events, then you go to the offices, things change for you, even just with that little bit of what seems obvious, but it's amazing how many people don't do that, whether it be in sport or in business. So I think that's a really good point that you have. And then I think the other one is that it's not just talent. It's sometimes people think, oh, well, they were born differently. I can't do that because I don't have that amount of talent. But I think it's an important thing that people hear from you that it's not just that. Yes, they may have talent, but they don't have to be the most talented person ever. It's they have enough, but then it's taking it that extra degree. Does all that sound accurate?
It's spot on. It's spot on. And you as a coach or as an athlete, you can't control how you came out of the womb. Like some people have like Uber, Michael Jordan's a great, or Michaela Schiffin's another great example of that. Just use her because maybe the audience is, well, the audience is going to be familiar with Jordan too, but just in the ski genre, she's super, super talented and really, really detail oriented and really, really hardworking. Jordan was the same way, just fiercely competitive, works super hard, but so like those people are, you know, yeah, they're like the extreme, but yeah, you can have B talent and still, do very, very well in you can win a medal at the Olympics, you can win, you can be part of an NBA championship team, you can be a great role player, even more than a role player. I don't think, just I don't know a ton about the NBA, but I've read a lot of stuff about the Bulls and Michael Jordan just because as a coach, because I just found it's like really, really interesting, all these different characters on that team and the way that Phil Jackson coached. And so I sort of know a fair amount about them, but, um, but yeah, it's just something that I think is big about the passion thing and the love for it is you can show up and go through the process on the day to day in a sort of semi-reluctant fashion, or you can, and you see athletes do that a lot, or you can show up and do it like really like each step of that day of training or that day of whatever you're doing, and you're just really taking care of the minutia and just you're just a little more present, or you're a little more in touch with each step of that process. I think that's huge.
Yeah. So then are you talking like the details of the day? So let's say you show up and you kind of have the training plan and you eat certain things and you really stick to a certain maybe cadence, certain disciplines. Is
Yeah,
that what you're talking about?
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like, yeah, you can just show up and not be well fed, or you can show up, and not have gone to bed, early enough the night before. Or I don't know why I think of this, but when I'm writing handwritten cards, if I think that it looks sloppy, I'll just tear it up and do it again. I could just
Hmm.
write a bunch of sloppy cards. Well, I sent out my X amount of cards today to clients or to potential clients, but if it's sloppy, maybe they're like, this guy kind of has sloppy handwriting. I don't know. Maybe he's gonna be like a sloppy realtor, you know?
Yep.
So I really try to just I just think those and that may make no difference at all, but I just don't think it's going to hurt.
Hmm.
I think it's just better to do it that way than not do it that way.
Oh, absolutely. I think those details do matter over time. So it's not that, are you working out once a week for 2 hours or are you working out 4 times a week for 30 minutes?
Mhm.
Those are going to look different. And so I think that consistency is what you're talking about that's applicable in both business and sport and all the other things of how are you dialing in the details of the training plan? Again, whether that be your business plan or your training plan to go to the Olympics, they're really on the same path, you know?
For
So,
sure. Yeah, the devil's if you want to be great, the devil's in the details for sure. I've seen it
mhm.
over and over and over and over and over throughout my career.
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing when I think of Bobby is mindset. And it's partially because you have so much fun. Like I see you when you're in, keep in mind, I see you on the personal side, probably more than the business side, but a bit of both.
Probably.
but you're fun and you have this great mindset all the time. I've never seen you like, oh, I'm so depressed and this is not going well. Like you have that excellence mindset. So as a coach, how do you adjust that mindset in the people you coach?
Mhm. Yeah, I think well, a couple of things just on me personally. I think you've got to also admit, when things aren't going well. It doesn't mean you just have to be real about it. I don't think you
Mhm.
can fool yourself about it. I think that's really important. You've got to be like, yeah, things aren't going well, and then you have admitted it, and you can make changes. Or you've just got to sometimes suffer through difficult situations without being like, Debbie Downer. In coaching, it's harder, I think, than when it's yourself because you don't have as much control over other people's mindsets or actions. Um, athletes that are it's been, I would say, a flaw of mine as a coach would be that I wasn't very good at coaching the athletes that didn't try really hard with
Mhm.
poor work ethic. And even if their talent level was high, sometimes I wasn't very good at that. And that's something that I have worked on over time to just be able to, because you sometimes you'll coach people that are like straight up lazy, but their talent levels are really, really high. I mean,
Mhm.
that happens for sure.
Yeah.
And so, but you've got to, you have to manage them as well. And you see that, like, to go back to the Bulls, Dennis Rodman was a guy, he was an amazing rebounder, but he was like, he partied a lot and he'd just be gone from training for days. And there's this one thing in this one Bulls book about the Bulls. And he's like, okay, I'm going to go to Las Vegas for 4 days. And Phil Jackson's like, all right, like, because, and then he was gone and then he didn't come back. So they sent three of his teammates to go to Las Vegas to go
Oh,
find him. And he came back. So he was supposed to be gone 4 days and he came back like 7 days. But,
oh
Phil,
no.
yeah, it was a crazy, but Phil Jackson managed him well. It's just, that was just Rodman's thing. And so,
Yeah.
and he wouldn't, he would have been so miserable being like, you can't go, and you really can't control these guys anyway. And he was an amazing rebounder, and they won tons and tons of NBA championships. So I don't know if I'm answering your, I don't know if I'm
No,
answering
no,
your
that
question or
that's
not, but
interesting.
it's
What I'm imagining is first, Dennis Rodman is probably the hardest person to lose. I saw him at an airport and he could not hide.
right,
So
right.
number one, but number two, I think that from the coach's perspective, it's figuring out how to coach individual personalities. And being a coach
Yeah.
of Dennis Rodman had to be one of the hardest spots to be in. That would be a difficult person to coach, but you're right. There was a benefit there that if he could get him there, they would win. So I'm sure that there is some incentive, and that's a good leadership lesson right there is how to coach the really difficult people.
I think the one thing that, yeah, I agree. I totally agree. The one thing that I was really aware of are people we were, you would sort of, we just mentioned this 6 minutes ago, but people that have kind of bad attitudes, like,
Hmm.
and they're kind of negative. That's something that that's never sat very well with me. You just don't want them to infect, or to affect your team, or your team in any, whether it's sports or business or whatever. You just, negative people, it's just not, it's really hard to be around
Hmm.
those
Yeah,
kind of
I can
people. And I
definitely.
think it's bad for your organization.
Hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. So then who are your favorite people to coach?
Well, yeah, you like the hardworking ones with a lot of talent, and this young lady, I consult with a few athletes still, and there's this one young lady. Her name is Olivia Giacchio. She's been on the team for quite some time now, and I coached her to the U.S. team, and she's had a good trajectory, but it hasn't been like this. It's been like this. She's
Hmm.
had moments, but it's never been from lack of effort. She's super smart. She goes to Columbia. Um, she's a good athlete, really great jumper in the moguls, good skier, but she's worked a lot on her weaknesses. She's not afraid to keep it real. I need to work on, my turns. I need to work on that technique. And but so I still consult with her, and she's a real pleasure to
Mhm.
coach and to consult with because she does the work, she's never shooting herself in the foot. She's maybe a little bit too much effort at times, but that's an easier thing. And as she matures, she's 23 now, so she's super young, but yeah, she's great. And yeah, consult with another athlete from the Vale team and then one from the Winter Sports Club. So yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, that's interesting. One thing you said that I want to make sure our listeners heard is
Mm,
it's not a straight line, right? There's good
mm,
days and there's bad days, and there's sometimes bad weeks, right? Or bad months.
absolutely.
But the trajectory overall is up over time. So I think that that's just something to point out, that even elite athletes have those bad weeks, days, months. And so anything you want to add to that, because you've probably seen that more than any of us.
Yeah, that's good. This is a great segue or great direction. So like if this is the trend, you know, corridor, if you will, it's going to bounce off there a little bit. But if
Mhm.
that corridor is pretty narrow and it's like there's excellence within that corridor, it's still gonna, if your corridor, you're like, you don't know what you're doing from day to day, and the corridor is really wide and you're having these big upswings and downswings, but you're going to for sure. It's really important. And you want to try to get yourself, an old coach said to me a long time ago, like you don't ever want to be like, well, it's a month or it's 2 months or it's 3 months, or and sometimes it's going to be that way, I mean, you could
Mhm.
real estate sometimes, interest rates are high and you're not going to sell as much stuff, and right, same for you. um but still, so you can't affect that, right? Like we can't affect interest rates,
Right,
right?
right.
But we can affect what we do on the day to day and make sure that we're being really good within that, corridor. But it's going to go up and down. Yeah, there's going to
Mhm.
be moments, it's going to be days. And and I think that it's one perspective I've always had since I was a little kid, honestly, is even when things are bad, like you have to keep it in perspective. You
Yeah.
have to keep, like, so that sort of woe is me, and that sort of, droopy dog style of moping around your family or your coaches or your office or whatever is just, to me, it's sort of, I don't know. It's sort of unacceptable. You can have moments of like, being upset or being sort of a bit down, but you can't be there for too long
Mhm.
because, it's not like we're working in a coal mine, or it's not like the Great Depression, or, you have to kind of keep that stuff in perspective. And I think that's maybe what keeps me a little bit more positive than is just, look, yeah, it's going to be okay. Just keep grinding away at it. And yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So then you've had this really interesting background and now you've moved into real estate. So with your coaching, competing, training, how has that prepared you for what you do today, which is real estate?
It's like the premise of our conversation. You just show
Yeah.
up and you do it and you do it and you do it. And it's one of the things in real estate that I don't necessarily like is you don't have a coach, sitting next to you going, well, do this. And then over time, you figure out what works. And there's, to me, like the path in real estate's a little more broad. You see people doing it, successful people doing it in a lot of different ways. And I just want to know the way, you know.
Right.
And I'm also a pretty curious mind, and I ask a lot of questions to people that are good at it. That's
Mhm.
just sort of my nature. Like good parents, I ask them a lot of questions about parenting, and good real estate agents, I ask them questions about, how they go about it. And most people are, quite open about that. In coaching, even though I coach at two Olympic Games, coach, for the national ski team for Canada through two games. I was head coach. And but I still had other coaches that, but a handful, like a small, like I could count them on one hand worldwide, the coaches I would call or text or email or all the above to ask questions about, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? about it could be planning, it could be strength and conditioning, it could be skiing, it's like
Mhm.
technique, it could be periodization, all the sort of minutia. But and but yeah, but the basic is, yeah, I mean, you got to work hard and try to be creative and try to in real estate, and just try to hone it in. And yeah, I feel like because my other career was so long as an athlete and as a coach, I feel like, I've got a long way to go and I don't really have a total grasp on it yet. But, and it takes time to build as well. But you just got to keep doing it, doing it
Yeah.
and doing it. So yeah.
That's an interesting perspective of the coaches and it's like now you have to seek out the coaches and you might have 100 versus having a few because it's all the people you're getting advice from as well. So it's interesting. I also think that you probably have a little bit different work ethic um, when you approach real estate of like, hey, I'm going to go and I'm going to do these 20 things today and this is what I'm going to do. So do you approach kind of that from the training perspective as well?
Yeah. Yeah. So that girl, Olivia, that I consult with, we have a mission statement. We built out, it's crazy. We've built out this document that's 27 pages long between us. And
That's a
it
lot.
speaks about goals and mindset, all sorts of things. Some of it's just purely technical, some of it's strength and conditioning, and it goes on and on and on. But there's like certain mission, there's a mission statement, and I like stolen a lot of that from this document. It's this Google Doc that we've shared over the past number of years, 5 years, and I've stolen a lot of stuff from that and just plugged it into real estate. So yeah. Yeah,
Fascinating.
so
Give me an example of one of those.
one second.
Okay. I'm excited.
Oh, that's not it. This is it. So yeah, so
And what I'm going to point out to our listeners at home is Bobby's finding that in like less than a minute. So obviously it's important to him and
that's a good point.
it's accessible. It's something he can grab and look at frequently, like we talked about last week with simple business plans. So just FYI to the listeners out there.
Yeah, yeah, I don't know as much about business as I know. I mean, as I know about skiing yet, but simple, I think, is a good way to start. And then, you can really digest that and use it every day. And then,
Mhm.
yeah. But
That's
this
really
is
good.
like, oh, this is just something, that I'll read it to you a little bit, but
Yeah,
like,
just read a sentence or two or a section or two.
yeah, yeah. So there's like vision. My vision is to be the most professional realtor in the world. Mission, share the steamboat dream through passion and enthusiasm. What is most important? My clients and their needs, what I value, performance, integrity, collaboration, environment, enjoyment, investment, how I behave, immediate follow-up, welcoming, genuinely friendly and composed, caring deeply and delivering in all aspects of the transaction, treating everyone better than they expect, respecting people and our environment, and on time is late. That's old school.
I'm a total nerd that way too, so don't you worry.
And
So
and
here's
then how I succeed. But anyway, that's
yeah,
there you go.
that's
There you
amazing. So
go.
here's what I want to point out. One, you took the time to pull that together, which took some serious thought for yourself and vision will guide people in the direction they want to go. So I love that you've done all this because of the training that you or the coaching that you've done with your athletes. And I think that's a big piece of the lesson that I'm going to take is that there's so many things that you can kind of take from one industry to another. And that's a really good example. Like Bobby hasn't done a lot of business training in his life, but he is instinctually saying, hey, I need to create a vision. I need to create some values that are really important to me. I need to define how I'm going to do this. And I think that that's huge. So we did not have this conversation before we had this podcast. And so I'm not surprised that he has all that based on what I know about Bobby already, but I love that you have that. So I think that's an important lesson for anybody listening to take away is going through those things is important in any aspect, whether you're brand new to something, but it's done in other places. So why not take that in and bring that to the business? So thanks for sharing that, Bobby.
Yeah, no worries. No worries. I had no idea I was going to be sharing that when we first, were speaking before you started to record. But yeah, no, my pleasure. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. So then what do you see for yourself and the industry going forward? Like how we had a podcast before called VUCA, which is basically talks about times that are tumultuous and changing, and there's adversity. So, kind of how are you prepared to face some of those as we move forward in the industry?
Well, I think you've got to find some silver lining. I mean, and you've just got to, yeah, with the suit and that with the commissions, right? I
Just
mean,
just everything. I mean, I
I
think that
mean,
it's a tumultuous time in real estate and lending in business, all of it. So,
yeah. I think that I mean, just using that as an example, I think I've educated myself enough, and honestly, I wasn't good at maybe understood, or I understood it, but I couldn't like grasp it deeply that just for this commissions, from the DOJ, I couldn't quite grasp it enough to be able to explain it to sellers. And so it just takes me a while. I think I'm like a slow study, but thank God I'm persistent because I think I'm a slow study, but finally has sort of like sunk in where I can speak to, you know, just for this is really specific. You're kind of maybe asking me a little broader question, but is it okay if I
yeah, go for it.
go down this road? Just to be able to speak to my value, and that it's no different than our conversation. Like, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to host open houses, and I'm going to represent you in the most professional way. And I'm a good negotiator, and we're going to be in this together. We're going to negotiate all contracts together, and I'm going to make sure that, depending if you're a buyer or seller, and with inspections, and I'll be there, shoulder to shoulder with you, sort of on the front
Mhm.
lines. And so I don't know, it's like you can't, some of the stuff you can control, you can only control what you can control. And the other stuff, you just don't want to let that infiltrate your 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 mind or your being, because it's just
Mhm.
negative. And right, I mean,
Yeah. Yep.
yeah, it's tumultuous. There's some things that are tumultuous, but there's every moment. Like I could, we'd need like an 8-hour podcast for me to discuss the tumultuous situations I had coaching. I mean, all kinds of stuff that, was my fault, some stuff that wasn't my doing, but was put on my plate. And I mean, I could go on and on and on. So, but you've got to be able to, yeah, be able to just move forward and address whatever needs to be addressed, but not dwell on it.
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, I think that that's a good point is we all have had adversity and we all will continue to face it. So it's more about how you face it and how you move ahead than the actual adversity itself, right? So,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you know, yeah, just in the athletic world, I know a lot of people that were world champions, Olympic champions, that had some really difficult things happen to them
mhm,
along the way, you know, parents passing away, or, it goes on and on and on, I mean, well, from my perspective, the 2 years before the Olympics that I skied in, I had two ACL reconstructions back to back. Got an
mhm,
ACL reconstruction in 90, blew out my knee, went back, had it fixed. The only thing I could think about was okay, let's get this thing fixed. Let's
mhm,
focus on physical therapy and rehab and get it done, and then go back. And then less than 12 months later, I blew out the same knee
mm,
again. And then I, had to go through that. And that was a little bit my fault. Maybe I was a little too aggressive on the rehab. I just wanted to get back more quickly than maybe I should have, and didn't listen to maybe my physical therapists. I knew the timeline via my doctor, Richard Stedman, but maybe not so much. So anyway, but whatever, took responsibility for that, came back and skied at the Olympics. So Yeah, that's a great example,
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah,
You know.
exactly. I mean, you've faced harder things. So I think that's and probably everybody has. So it's we will all be okay and be able to at first really face any adversity. At least we've all made it through to this point, right? We're still here. So that always says something. So okay.
Yeah, and just on that, Kathryn, you know,
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a matter of, some people will say like, well, I'll survive. I don't think survival, I don't think surviving is good enough, I think
Yeah.
you've got to thrive. Even in the situation where you have back-to-back ACL reconstructions or a family member passes away on your, along your Olympic journey or just before
Mhm.
you're going to go to the Olympics or whatever the case may be, I think that, yeah, I just think you've got to
Yeah.
thrive,
Yeah. That's a
yeah,
good distinction.
versus just survive. Yeah.
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 Very true. And a lot of things, you do have the ability to do that when things are crazy is sometimes when those success stories really happen. So, well, good. Well, last question for you. What's one of your favorite training moments from either being an athlete, being a coach, or something really like one of your biggest lessons that you learned in your time doing that?
Oh, biggest lessons?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. There's a lot of them. Well, it's never over till it's over. Um,
That's a
you
good
know,
one.
you know, I coached this athlete when I was coaching the national ski team for Canada. This guy, Marc-Andre Moreau, and Mark had good talent. I mean, if he were listening to this, he'd agree with me. He's from Quebec, and he had good talent. I give him like B plus talent. B plus, not
Mm-hmm.
A plus, not A, not A minus, B plus talent. And but my Mark worked really hard. He was a guy I really connected with, and we did a lot of stuff to work on his technique over the years. And we were at the World Championships, and he qualified. He had a terrible qualifying run. He was like not really activated, and he's just like kind of just a little too low in his energy in the start gate. And he qualified. I was just talking about this 2 weeks ago qualified like 13th out of 16. Only the top 16 make the finals. And from my World Cup experience as a coach, as an athlete, like no one makes a run from like that far down in qualification to put it on the podium, especially at major events. Especially at major events. And and Mark was pretty mad at himself about qualifying that low because he certainly didn't need to qualify. He shouldn't have qualified that low. I mean, it was his doing, but he was
Right.
mad at himself, and he ended up getting second at world. He had silver medal at the World Championships, and he just charged from the back. And we were in Finland, and two of the guys from Finland, we were lucky on that day too, just to be clear. But two of the really good Finnish guys crashed
Mm,
or blew out, made huge mistakes. And so that's a great example of like you just don't know and you just have to, it's just not over till it's over. And so you gotta,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
So true. We've had and to relate it to what we do now, I've had a few clients who end up going elsewhere, right? And I get so bummed out, like, oh, I lost that. And then 3 years later, they'll show up and say, really, we should have used you and we're going to use you for from now on.
Yeah.
So I had to lose that one to gain them as a, raving fan. And that's always painful, but it's such a good lesson that it's really not over till it's over. That's a good point.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And you don't know, and sort of my current coach said this to me, and I know this, but when one door, this is like some prophecy or something, or some but when one door closes, you think like you're like, oh, I can't believe I, lost that client
Mhm.
or whatever. Other doors open,
Yeah.
and that's not always the case. Sometimes it's just a bad thing that never comes back to you. But what are you gonna do? Like, you lost the client, you have to look at why did I lose the client?
Mhm.
Sometimes it's your doing, sometimes it's not. Sometimes
Yeah.
people move on and people are people, right?
Yep.
And right. But yeah, yeah, and once you've decided what you could have done differently or not, just depending, if you look at yourself honestly, That's it. But stuff always comes back around, You're
Yeah,
just taking care of the day to day, moment to moment stuff, right? You're like
absolutely.
that. You're like that.
Totally.
You've always been that way professionally. I think you've always done
Hmm.
a really, really good job
Thank
of
you.
that. Very present and yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, good. Well, Bobby, thank you so much for being here. I'm going to
Yeah.
close out the podcast with Bobby Aldighieri, and it was a fun conversation to have. Bobby has always taught me a bunch of things, and I'm glad that our listeners are able to learn some things from him as well. You can find us on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, Building Bigger Lives. Thanks so much for being here. Thanks for being here, Bobby. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Kathryn.
Absolutely.